As I cycled through sunny Christchurch on the way to the studio today, I went through the middle of our city, and Fletcher's got a very nice, comfortable deal with the government in building in the middle of the city. And at the bottom, they've got a whole lot of units, and they're all empty. And it says all the one-bedroom units sold. Now, the urban myth, and I'm not sure whether it's any more than this, is that a number of Auckland property people are purchasing Christchurch houses because they're cheap, a lot cheaper than Auckland, and that they're leaving them empty. And I think that there's a media, there's something that the media could follow up here. Why are those places empty where it says they're sold? Who owns them? And you know, what is this doing supposedly?
I'd find that out too, Gary, because it would be very interesting to find that out. I cannot believe that people would buy a place in Christchurch and not rent it out, because they would be liable for any increase in the value of it would be taxable. It just doesn't make sense. You have a whole heap of outgoings and you've got no rent coming in. I cannot believe that landlords would be doing that en masse.
I'll tell you what, Andrew, next time you come to Christchurch, find my phone number out from Radio New Zealand. I'll take you down and show you.
No, I don't just believe that their properties are empty. I just don't think it's going to be landlords who own them. So look, if you can...
No, I'd say... Sorry, no, but what... You were defining landlord, whereas I'm saying property speculation. And these are property speculators, and I'm not sure they do pay tax too.
Andrew King, head of the Property Investors Federation. Andrew, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you for your time today. And now, quite a response regarding the future of public broadcasting. But this one here first, as Andrew said, being a landlord is a business. It's about profit. It's not about serving society. If we want to reform our landlords so that land is held in the interests of society and profit, then we should vote for it. I would, says Ganya. Karen says, I lived in Australia for 18 years and Triple J, the ABC youth channel, was brilliant. It is an amazing platform for getting important, relevant opinions out to youth, mixed in with fabulous music, of course. And I'm 65 years old. I'd still want to listen to it, says Karen. Roger says, I'm a big fan of Triple J, and Triple J is uncensored. How would that go in New Zealand? I loved listening to the concert program, though, in the truck, driving through the Alps in Mackenzie High Country for years, says Roger.
Well, we just need to do it as well as Triple J, and there is there's no reason why we can't.
Correct.
We've got the talent, the commitment.
I asked actually earlier. Gary?
I just think anyone who's listening to this who hasn't listened to Music 101 on Saturday afternoons...
Great show.
It's really good.
It's an amazing show, and it's infectious, and we need to have people like that running something like this, but I still say there's got to be room for both.
I'll go run and tell the team. Charlotte Ryan, the presenter, and the team on that, if you're a bit of a fan of Music 101, Gary.
Yeah, me too.
Well, it was really interesting. When one of my kids was at school, he won a music competition. The following Saturday, they had his band on the radio.
Nice. All right, with that, we've got to move on. Gary Moore and Cindy Mitchener, it's great having you on the show. I'm Wallace Chapman, back Monday. Checkpoint next.
Thanks for having us, Wallace.
Kei te whakaronga mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Nita Blakeperson, in tonight for Lisa Owen. You can watch us live on Facebook at rnz.co.nz/checkpoint, on Freeview Channel 50 and on Face TV Sky Channel 83. On tonight's programme, China runs out of hospital beds as the deadly coronavirus infects more than 30,000 people and claims almost 700 lives. 61 infected, the floating palace that's turned into a prison. We speak to passengers on the cruise ship in lockdown. The floodwaters are gone, but the clean-up's only just beginning in Southland. Further north, scorching summer temperatures put the squeeze on Auckland's water surfaces. What will the new RNZ and TVNZ merger look like? We talk to the Broadcasting Minister. All that after the news at 5 o'clock.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata with DNA. The state of emergency for Clutha district has been lifted this afternoon. The council says it is now moving to the recovery phase as staff focus on assessments and repairs to roads and other infrastructure. Some of the work may take some time and staff ask all affected residents to bear with them. While water treatment plants are recovering, residents on all urban and rural water schemes should continue to conserve water over the weekend. And in Southland, an emergency operations base is set up in Matoda. It's been kept busy today. Team leader Elaine Moriarty says by lunchtime today about 50 people had come through. She expects it to get busier as people return home in the next few days.
We have blankets, pillows, toilet paper, things like that. They're just the essentials that people need for when they start getting back into their home, or their home is wet and their mattresses or their bedding is wet, just to have that available to people.
Elaine Moriarty. One flood-hit Matoda family are camping on their back lawn as they wait for their house to dry out. About 30 properties in the Southland town have been affected by flooding. Shirley Wilkins lives on Bristol Street and spent the day cleaning up. She says it'll be some time before they can live there again.
We slept in the van last night. We've got a 6-person tent we're going to stick up when the lawn dries out a bit more and stay there. It's camping. It's summer. You camp in summer.
Matoda resident Shirley Wilkins. Health authorities are urging New Zealanders who've recently returned from China to register with a new helpline if they're in self-imposed quarantine. The Ministry of Health says anyone who returned after Monday should isolate themselves for 2 weeks if they were in mainland China. Anyone who travelled from Hubei or Wuhan City should also isolate themselves and avoid close contact such as social gatherings, workplaces, schools and restaurants. The Director-General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says registration allows health staff to know where people are.
And the intention is that Healthline staff would call them every day or two just to check in that they're fine in terms of their health and well-being, but also if they have any other needs, like making sure they've got enough food supplies and so on, and or have got someone who can help them out with that.
Dr. Ashley Bloomfield. Another 41 people on a cruise ship under quarantine in Japan have tested positive for the new coronavirus, bringing the total to 61. Sick passengers from the Diamond Princess, including one New Zealander, are being treated in a Japanese hospital. New Zealand airline pilots have expressed safety concerns over ongoing problems with Auckland Airport's main runway, with reports of 30-centimetre chunks of concrete coming loose when planes land. A number of flights were diverted or delayed yesterday afternoon after the runway was shut down for maintenance, the second time this has happened this year. Andrew Ridling from the Airline Pilots Association questioned whether adequate investment has been made in the runway.
For me, the shock came to hear that there was 30 centimetre by 30 centimetre, which is a foot by a foot, blocks of concrete breaking off and being picked up off the runway. You know, it only has to occur once to be a fairly major safety concern.
Captain Andrew Ridling. Fire and Emergency suspect one of the several fires in Hawke's Bay this week may have been deliberately lit. Crews are monitoring 4 fires across the region, including 2 near Waipoua, 1 south of Hastings and another west of the town. The Principal Rural Fire Officer says an investigation is underway into a blaze that broke out on Wednesday morning north of Napier. Trevor Mitchell says the fire started in rubbish dumped by the road. He says the other fires this week were caused by the hot, dry conditions and sagging power lines, mower strikes and a spark from a quad bike exhaust. It's 4 minutes past 5. Quick bowler Kylie Jamieson will make his Black Caps debut against India in Auckland tomorrow. He's in for Scott Kugelheim, who has the flu. Stand-in coach Shane Jurgensen says Jamieson has been putting his hand up for a while.
You know, he's been doing really well, winter training squads and for the A team. Had a very impressive A series, obviously a huge man, 6'8", so quite an imposing sight. So, I look forward to him seeing what he can do out here tomorrow.
Shane Jurgensen says pace bowler Lockie Ferguson is close to a full return from injury and could play for Auckland this weekend. New Zealand will meet the Philippines in tomorrow's final at the Asia-Oceania Group 2 Fed Cup tennis tournament in Wellington. The winner will be promoted to Group 1 for 2020. New Zealand swept past Singapore 3-0 after both Valentina Ivanov and Kiwi number 1 Paige Hourigan enjoyed 6-1, 6-1 victories in the singles. Emily Fanning and Erin Rutcliffe then teamed up to win the doubles rubber. All Blacks and Crusaders outside back Sevu Reece has re-signed with New Zealand Rugby and his Super Rugby club until 2022. Reece had a breakout 2019 after being called into the Crusaders as a replacement, which led to an All Blacks cap-up. Nike says the Alpha Fly shoe worn by Eliud Kipchoge to break the 2-hour marathon barrier will be legal under World Athletics' new rules, and says widespread reports of its shoes containing triple carbon plates are false. That's the news.
Cleaning up after the floods.
It's just a bit depressing when you look at what's got to be cleaned up. It's just horrendous.
Celebrating after his victory.
We have something that just worked out. I mean, it worked out. We went through hell unfairly, did nothing wrong,
And marking our National Day.
Lots of people seem to have smiles and look happy, and sometimes it can be more challenging.
All views on Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow for Northland, Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Waikato and Waitomo. Mainly fine, isolated light showers possible during the afternoons and evenings. Auckland, fine weather. Taranaki to Wellington, including central high country, mostly fine with brief rain tomorrow night. Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloudy, a few showers until tonight. Mainly fine tomorrow with a brief period of rain in Wairarapa and Hawke's Bay. Nelson, fine weather. Bulla to Fiordland, cloudy, cloud increasing, a few showers in Fiordland later tonight. Rain for a time tomorrow, then clearing from the south. Marlborough and Canterbury, fine spells increasing, brief rain tomorrow morning or afternoon, then clearing, and showers persisting about the foothills, possibly thundery with hail. For Otago and Southland, mainly fine, isolated showers in the east tonight, brief rain tomorrow morning, then isolated showers again. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, occasional rain tomorrow night. RNZ National, it's 7 minutes past 5.
Kia ora, Susana. If you're just joining us, I'm Nita Blake-Person and for Lisa Owen, and this is Checkpoint. The impact of the coronavirus is being felt by many countries as more cases of the disease emerge. Chinese state media says more than 600 people have died and 31,000 people have contracted the virus. Thousands of people are in quarantine on 2 cruise ships in Asia after 61 passengers, including 1 New Zealander, were confirmed with the coronavirus on board the Diamond Princess. It's also emerged a doctor who tried to warn Chinese authorities about the deadly disease is now another one of its victims. The BBC's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes reports.
This is what happens when fear takes hold. Shops in Hong Kong were being cleared of rice and toilet paper as rumours swirled of a complete shutdown of the border with mainland China. Out in Hong Kong Harbour, a huge cruise ship. The virus possibly loose on board. Several passengers have tested positive and no one is being allowed off.
你好，你的情况怎么样？
From his balcony, Hinsley Lee can look out at his hometown,
不太好。
but can't go there.
I am nervous, but the only thing we can do is stay in our cabins and be careful.
Hong Kong has now at least 5 cases of people with the coronavirus who haven't been to mainland China and haven't had any apparent contact with people from mainland China. Also, 3 of them live in the same place. That is this building behind me here. And that may be the first indication of what is called community transmission. That is the virus passing from one person to another here in Hong Kong.
Experts here say they are now not optimistic that the virus can be contained and that a full pandemic may be on the way. Not so, according to the Chinese ambassador to London, insisting China has the situation under control.
It is our hope that the governments of all countries, including the UK, should understand and support China's efforts, respect the professional advice of WHO, avoid overreaction, avoid creating panic.
But at the same time, from Wuhan, pictures the like of which we haven't seen in generations. Stadiums, gymnasiums and conference centres all being turned into fever centres. So desperate is the shortage of beds for the sick.
喂，你好。 你好，是申小姐吗？
对，是。By phone, I managed to talk to a young woman in Wuhan who described to me the stress of not knowing what is really going on and what to believe.
We don't feel safe. We don't know how the virus is passed from one person to another. But we can't stay at home all the time. And we don't know when this will end. We don't know when we'll be able to return to normal life. That's very stressful.
There is some good news. These are patients who have recovered, leaving hospital. Tonight we learned that the virus had killed Dr. Li Wenliang. In early December, this brave Wuhan doctor had attempted to warn the authorities about the spread of a dangerous new virus. His warnings were ignored.
Rupert Wingfield-Hayes reporting, and stay with us because after 5:30 we'll be speaking to a passenger on board the Diamond Princess cruise ship, which is in quarantine in Yokohama. That ship has 3,700 people on board, including 13 New Zealanders, one of whom is among the 61 so far infected with the coronavirus. The Broadcasting Minister is adamant that RNZ National will remain commercial-free under any new media set up with TVNZ. Chris Whaafoy today confirmed that work will begin on a business case for creating a new super-sized public broadcaster, as reported by RNZ last month. Cabinet has approved a business case to look at the viability of creating a new public media entity as an independent, multiple platform multimedia operation. The new entity would receive a mixture of both government funding and advertising. I spoke to Chris Whaafoy a short time ago and asked him whether this is the end of RNZ and TVNZ as we know it.
No, it's not, because that decision hasn't been made. And the decision that has been made is for a detailed business case to be undertaken in order for us to look at creating a new public media entity, which we hope will be fit for the future, because after some work, I think while RNZ and TVNZ in their current forms have done great work, the challenges on the horizon are difficult, as they are for all media companies. And we do think that needs to be changed. But before we make that decision, we've asked for that business case to be done.
So what can RNZ and TVNZ be doing better?
Look, it's they all face challenges. They both face challenges. I think different platforms that have come on the scene, changing appetites from consumers, funding and advertising also are issues. And the ability to create one entity, as is proposed, we think will allow them to meet some of those challenges, especially with the likes of different platforms and aligning a lot of the work that a public broadcaster might do across those different platforms. Again, we've asked for that business case to come to us, for us to make that decision. I think in order to future-proof public media, which is extremely important given, I think, the state of media in general, for the current generation and next generation of New Zealanders who want to continue the types of New Zealand stories being told and people like me being held to account.
So is this more about sharing resources, HR, or how many newsrooms would you anticipate in this merger?
Look, the business case will look at that, but what I don't want to get into is into what this means just for staff. It also means about what resources might be available for those people who want to work in the new entity to work across platforms. And I think that's what we need to keep at the top of mind. Audiences in New Zealand are accessing and consuming their media in a much different way to when I was in the media 20 years ago and as they were 5 years ago. So making sure that the newsrooms within that, those who might make other types of content, have the ability to work across a number of platforms to tell those quintessentially New Zealand stories is extremely important. And we don't have that at the moment because we've got two entities that have been the traditional public media for some time now.
Presumably you're talking about more online content. I guess, does that mean that RNZ and TVNZ's websites would merge? What does this look like?
Look, I'm not going to get into operational matters or decisions or musings about what it might look like because it's not the purview of the Minister of Broadcasting. What we do want to have is an entity that can work on platforms that exist now or that may exist in the future that don't exist right now, and be able to be nimble enough to change to that. I think both RNZ and TVNZ, as I say, who have done great jobs with being traditional broadcasters, we think are not necessarily fit for purpose for the next 20, 25 years in order to be that nimble, which is why we're proposing the new entity and asking for that business case to be done to prove to us that it can be done in a way that delivers public good through a public media mandate, but also that it can pay for itself.
What aspects aren't fit for purpose, Minister?
Look, I think if you think of the ability of traditional broadcasters or traditional public media in New Zealand to deal with platform challenges, we've got a hell of a lot more competition for sets of eyes and ears available to New Zealanders now. And, you know, whether RNZ or TVNZ have the capacity to compete with those types of platforms to make sure that they're as accessible or offering the kind of New Zealand stories that that we will want to see on those platforms or similar platforms is the kind of challenge that they've got. So, as I say, I think I'm not taking anything away from what both RNZ and TVNZ have done in the past and right up to now, but it's our job to make sure that they're fit for purpose for the future, which is behind the announcement today to get that business case done to make sure that it is fit for purpose beyond our lifetimes.
How much is this all going to cost?
Look, that's what the business case will come back and give us. As we've said in the announcement, there will be continue to be crowdfunding and non-crown commercial funding, but, and I want to stress this very clearly, those platforms that are commercial-free and non-commercial today will continue to be commercial-free and non-commercial in the future. I think that is extremely important because we want to make sure that New Zealanders understand that the entity will have a very strong public media mandate.
How can you give that guarantee, Minister, given isn't that something the business case needs to decide, whether that's financially viable?
Well, I'm giving that guarantee because that is something that the Cabinet Ministers, took this proposal to them, fundamentally wanted it to be as part of the proposal. So, as I say, it will have a strong public media mandate. There will be a combination of crowdfunding and non-crown funding. The business case will be able to flesh out some of the finer detail about that. But those platforms, like Radio New Zealand National, that are commercial-free at the moment, will continue to be commercial-free in the future.
Does it make sense then, given all those constraints, for RNZ and TVNZ to combine some of our resources, be it HR or legal teams or newsrooms?
Look, that will be part of the detailed business case. But, that is kind of administration, and sure, that will be looked at. I am concerned about audiences and not administration. And in order for our public media entities or public media in New Zealand to flourish, it is our belief that action and change needs to come to strengthen public media for the future.
What's the timeline on this, Minister?
So we hope to have this detailed business case back to us in 6 months. I don't think it'll take very long for us to peruse it and make a decision. So I think that's the kind of time frame we're looking at.
And are you supportive, Minister, of the proposed changes to RNZ Concert that have been announced this week?
Oh, look, we met with the Chief Executive and some board members of Radio New Zealand last week, and they outlaid their intention around the youth strategy. As I said earlier today, we had a small number of concerns in amongst that, and we said that we'd get back to them about trying to mitigate some of that. I'm not going to get into the merits of a youth strategy or Concert FM. I know there's been a sizable amount of feedback about the move and the decision that Radio New Zealand has made. I'm going to make that very clear. And there, as I say, there are a few issues that we said we'd try and look at because of concerns to mitigate some of those concerns that we outlined to the Radio New Zealand management and board last week.
You have concerns with the proposal to scrap RNZ Concert?
No, I think we've got concerns about some of the aspects of their proposal. That we're not getting involved in programming and operational decisions, but there were a number of things that we could do and that we're looking at in order to mitigate some of the aspects of the decision made by Radio New Zealand to have a look at its Concert FM strategy and also the strategy as well.
What aspects were concerning?
I'm not going to go into that. I think I've got to go away and do some work and see what we can do about that. And if we can do things, we will, and we'll announce that when we're ready.
And that was the Broadcasting Minister, Chris Farfoy. It has just gone 20 minutes past 5 o'clock, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Nita Blakeperson in for Lisa Owen. As always, we're keen for your feedback. If you have any thoughts on that media merger, let us know. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The clean-up is underway in Southland after days of flooding, and some people are just starting to understand the extent of damage to their homes and towns. Authorities in Southland say up to 30 homes in Matoda have been affected, and up to 20 of those could be uninhabitable. A dozen houses were also evacuated in Gore, and the Rural Support Trust is providing assistance to severely affected farmers in the district. The Civil Defence Minister, Peeni Henare, visited the area today. He thanked locals, civil defence and the first responders for the job they had done in response to the emergency, and announced a funding boost for the local mayoral relief funds.
We do know that there are some adverse times, not just experienced, but in front of us. And it's in that vein that, for my part as Minister for Civil Defence, we're happy to initiate the Mayor's Relief Fund mechanism to allow $100,000 to be utilised here by our local governments. The mayors and their administrations have the mechanism to plug gaps, and those gaps are after the likes of the NZTA have looked at infrastructure and a whole heap of other things. This particular fund allows the mayors to perhaps target and plug some of those gaps. We know that support will be ongoing. This is an initial response to the adverse weather event, but we know that the recovery is going to take some time across the rural sector, the tourism sector, and no doubt others. And as the days unfold, we'll have a better assessment and appreciation of what that might look like, and further dialogue will continue to happen. I've had a good chance to fly over with the team here today. The waters have gone down a lot, which allows for an opportunity to assess the full extent of the damage. Happy to say that in our very brief visit to Matoda, it's almost had a sense of business as usual, but there's no doubt some longer term planning and thinking has to be done to make sure that should this event happen in the future, towns like Matoda, Wyndham and others are better prepared for such events.
Mr Henare says he will brief the Prime Minister and Cabinet on what he has seen during his visit to the flood-stricken region. That includes the situation in Matoda, where floodwaters almost reached toxic waste stored in an unused paper mill, which can cause toxic ammonia gas to be released if saturated with water.
I think it's fair to say, and we'll all agree, that in some respects we dodged a bullet over the past few days, but it's important that in the long term a solution needs to be found, and I've been in discussions with Minister Parker and I will be briefing the Prime Minister and Cabinet on the matter, and I do know that it's of high priority.
That was the Civil Defence Minister, Peeni Henare. And while the mop-up is underway for residents in Matoda, locals are rallying to muck in together and help. Our reporter Sarah Robson put on her gumboots and went out to check how it's going.
When Alison Bishop was finally allowed back into Matoda last night, she found her house on Bristol Street surrounded by water. She couldn't even get inside. But by first thing this morning, the floodwaters had receded and the clean-up could begin.
Well, we cleared the garage out so that we can put all our furniture out there to dry. They're just away getting pallets, so we can sit them up off the ground so the air can get under them. And then once we get all the furniture out, then we'll start ripping carpets and shifting other stuff. Yeah, I know. So it's a big job.
The carpet was sodden and squelched with every step. There was a fine layer of silt covering the floor in the kitchen and the bathroom, and the bottom of the shower was brown. The skirting boards around the house were starting to swell and the air smelt damp. But the Bishops are lucky. There are plenty of people to help out with the clean-up.
Look at everybody. The help we're getting. It's amazing. I've got a friend that's cooking food to bring down to us. I've got people that have offered to do laundry. It's just unbelievable.
4 local firemen and a couple of neighbours were needed to shift Alison Bishop's pride and joy, her customised storage unit for her crafting supplies.
You want that chair shifted out of the way, guys?
That's right.
It's really heavy, I'm warning you now, and it's wet, so it's going to be worse.
Linley Pope, who lives around the corner on Auckland Street, was also giving the Bishops a hand.
We had water in the garage. It went through the deep freeze, but luckily it turned on this morning and nothing in the house. So, yep, these are good people, so we come around and give anybody a hand. It's, just what you do.
By lunchtime, the house was empty. The carpet and lino had been ripped out, and anything that couldn't be salvaged was in a heap outside. A lounge suite, a mattress, and the rest of the Bishop's furniture was on the driveway drying out. Next door, Shirley Wilkins has managed to get everything out of her house too, but she's dreading the pile of washing she has to do.
Big 200-litre bags, well they're only half full, otherwise they're too heavy, of washing, and there's 2 baskets. We had to empty these bottom drawers out of clothes, they were all wet. Sheets, duvet covers are all wet.
As for where Shirley Wilkins and her family will be staying in the meantime...
We slept in the van last night. We've got a 6-person tent we're going to stick up when the lawn dries out a bit more and stay there. It's camping. It's summer. You camp in summer.
Matoda's community centre has been turned into an emergency operations base. Elaine Moriarty is running things there, and she says they've got everything from drinking water to pet food for anyone who needs it.
We have blankets, pillows, toilet paper, things like that. They're just the essentials that people need for when they start getting back into their home, or their home is wet and their mattresses or their bedding is wet, just to have that available to people.
A boil water notice is in place in Matoda, and it's not expected to be lifted until at least early next week. The government announced today that it's contributing $100,000 to mayoral relief funds in Southland. It'll be up to local councils to decide where that money is best spent, but any decisions on that are still some days away yet. E Matoda, mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
And too much water down south, but not enough further north. Desperate and stressful. That's how water companies in Auckland are describing severe shortages, crippling some families on tank supplies. There are a limited number of refill pumps for water companies in the region, where trucks are facing long waits to fill up. Earlier today, Auckland Council opened on-tap contingency water supplies in Helensville, Wellsford, Orewa and Te Puru. But as Katie Doyle reports, it may be too little, too late.
For the first time in 31 years, high demand has forced Earl Thorley, owner of Waitakere Transport Limited, to stop taking new orders for tank refills. Mr Thorley says at one point the company had a waiting list of 5 weeks.
Well, there's only so many hours in the day that the trucks can actually work legally. Fill points queuing up, backing up. Watercare had in some fill points reduced pressure, which creates longer fill times.
He says it's been an extremely stressful time for all water carriers in the region. Mr Thorley says the extra demand can be put down to Auckland's ever-increasing population and the dry weather.
At the end of the day, we're dependent on rainfall. If people are not getting the rainfall for this length of time, those that normally would manage through on what they've conserved over winter are coming into the mix, along with those that are regular customers every season.
Further up the country in Warkworth, Christine Walker from Artisan and Solway Water says she has been fielding more than 300 calls a day from desperate residents. She says the situation is the worst it can be.
If we'd kept taking bookings indefinitely, we'd probably be looking at having about 3 or 4 months worth of people waiting at the moment. So we've stopped now towards at the end of March. We're booked up till, so we've stopped taking any more bookings.
In response, Auckland Council has now opened on-tap contingency water supplies in Helensville, Wellsford, Orewa and Te Puru. The Deputy Mayor and Franklin Ward Councillor Bill Cashmore says it's the driest summer he's ever seen.
The dry started probably 6 weeks earlier than normal. There's not enough water trucks around,
And I know that councillors, local board members are trying to find more water trucks from other places, and Watercare's doing its bit by providing emergency water, and we're opening up council facilities where we can.
Aucklanders living on the reticulated supply are also being urged to conserve water, after the city used more than 550 million litres in a day earlier this week. But Rosalind Klein from Watercare, which supplies homes and businesses between Waiwera and Pukekohe, says there are no hard restrictions in place.
However, it's really the time to start being mindful about water use, especially as high water users like we're seeing at the moment is putting real pressure on the infrastructure. Our reservoirs, our pipes, our water treatment plants have to produce a lot more than usual.
Auckland is just one of the regions being hit with water shortages. Drought levels in Kaikohe has led the far north town to begin preparing for its supply to run out. And Ngā Whā Prison, one of Kaikohe's biggest water users, has been forced to limit prisoner shower times to 3 minutes, twice daily. For Checkpoint, Katie Doyle.
I'm Nita Blake-Person. You're listening to Checkpoint. Coming up on RNZ National, New Zealand airline pilots worry about the safety of Auckland Airport's main runway. And they paid for a 2-week luxury cruise, but will get at least 2 more weeks on board the Diamond Princess. Passengers on board speak of being confined to their rooms, some with no natural light or fresh air, as the coronavirus takes hold. We'd love your feedback. If you're listening from Southland, how has the weather impacted you, or are you in that water shortage area further north? You can text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, we're at RNZ Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But first, here's Susanna Leatawa with the headlines.
The state of emergency for Clutha District has been lifted this afternoon, with the council now moving to a recovery phase. The council says assessments and repairs to roads and other infrastructure will be undertaken, but may take some time. Urban and rural residents are being urged to conserve water over the weekend while treatment plants recover. And in Southland, an emergency operations base set up in Matoda has been kept busy today. Team leader Elaine Moriarty says by lunchtime today about 50 people had come through. They were given essentials such as blankets, pillows and toilet paper to ensure they can return home, even if most of their belongings have been soaked through. New Zealanders who've recently returned from China are being asked to register with a new helpline. The Ministry of Health says anyone who returned after Monday should isolate themselves for 2 weeks if they were in mainland China. The helpline will ensure Healthline staff can check in with those registered to see if they're well and if they have enough supplies while in self-imposed quarantine. New Zealand airline pilots have expressed safety concerns over ongoing problems with Auckland Airport's main runway, including large chunks of concrete coming loose. A number of flights were diverted or delayed yesterday afternoon after the runway was shut down for maintenance. Andrew Ridling from the Airline Pilots Association says he's unsure if adequate investment has been made on the runway. The Broadcasting Minister is adamant that RNZ National will remain commercial-free under any new media set-up with TVNZ. Chris Farfoy confirmed today that work will begin on a business case for creating a new supersized public broadcaster, as reported by RNZ last month. He told Checkpoint that audiences will be a priority and the aim of the proposal is to strengthen public media for the future. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
And turning to business news now with Madison Reading. Evening, Maddie.
Evening, Nita.
The State Spy Agency is calling on businesses to improve their cybersecurity measures. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the Government Communications Security Bureau, also known as the State Spy Agency, which I personally think is a much cooler name. Now, they've said that businesses must do more to protect their systems and their networks from cyber attacks. So its National Cybersecurity Centre within the Bureau did a survey in 2018. They looked at 250 nationally significant organisations, and they found that too few businesses are taking cybersecurity measures seriously. In fact, less than 20% of those 250 organisations actually had a dedicated executive dealing with cybersecurity matters. Of those 250 organisations as well, just 40%, in fact, only 40% said that they were barely confident they would even know if their systems or network were hacked. Now, I spoke with the Director General of the GCSE GCSB, Andrew Hampton, about this. And he says that while businesses are taking these matters more seriously now, they are engaging with the GCSB and taking a lot more notice of their advice for the private sector. He does say, though, that the evidence of them taking more action is yet to be seen. Now, while he was hammering home the importance of cybersecurity measures for both the private and public sector, he gave some pretty eyebrow-raising figures. He said that the GCSB got involved in about 340-odd cyber incidents just last year alone, 38% of which could be linked back directly to foreign states, including China, Russia and North Korea. Now, when I was talking to him, I asked him, what is most concerning for the GCSB? And he said that directly those foreign state interference cases are top of mind and most concerning for the agency.
We have a concern about those complex, persistent, often state-sponsored type attacks, but it really is just the tip of the iceberg. For example, there's criminal activity, there's internet scams. The types of guidance, though, that we provide to help protect organisations from the high-end threats would go a long way towards mitigating the risk of other threats as well.
That was the Director General of the GCSB, the Government Communication Security Bureau, Andrew Hampton, and talking about that foreign state interference, he said that some of those cyber attacks were directly targeting New Zealand businesses, while some of them were just trying to hack New Zealand infrastructure to then hack other countries from there.
Right. And in other business news, companies are being told they still have work to do when it comes to diversity.
Yeah, so the NZX, the New Zealand Stock Exchange, released some figures on this, as they do now. Now, it showed that 29% of the top 50 listed companies on our stock exchange do have women at their board tables. The target, though, was 30%, so they're almost there, not quite there yet. Now, when it comes to women who have chief executive roles or other senior corporate roles at our top listed companies, the numbers there are way down at just 25%. Now, if companies did need a reason to take diversity and inclusion more seriously, the Institute of Directors said that companies who do take this on actually perform better, so they tend to retain talent better. They're also more innovative, and interestingly, they actually have fewer instances of fraud within their ranks. Who would have linked those two? If it's any consolation, though, the figures did show that all of the country's top 50 listed companies now have a diversity policy in place. That's up from just 94% in 2018.
Little wins. And Maddie, can you give us the latest on the markets today?
Yeah, so the NZX Top 50 Index closed up 1.4%. That's a rise of 157 points to close the week at 11,760. The New Zealand dollar, that's buying at 64.6 US cents, 96 to the Australian, and just under 50 British pence.
Thank you so much. That's Madison Reedy with the latest business news. More than 3,700 passengers remain in quarantine on the Diamond Princess cruise ship now docked at Yokohama. More than 60 passengers have now been diagnosed with the coronavirus, including one New Zealander. 13 New Zealanders are on board the ship, which left Yokohama on January the 20th. The ship had travelled through Japan to Hong Kong, Vietnam and Taiwan before it was asked to return a day early to Yokohama when passengers began falling ill. All passengers have been confined to their cabins since Monday, and only in the past 24 hours have passengers in inside cabins been allowed out on the deck. They had to be a metre apart for an hour and a half of fresh air. British man Dave Abel is celebrating his 50th wedding anniversary on board. He says he and other passengers are frustrated with a lack of information from both the ship's captain and their own consulates and are relying on social media for updates. He says some passengers have also run out of medicine. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, when we spoke with Dave, the latest update he had was that 20 passengers were infected, not 60.
So the questions on my mind that I would love to have answers to is our quarantine now extended from the 14 days to 16 days or 17 days? And even more importantly, when we get back to the UK, will we be put in quarantine yet again for a further period of time? We are not getting that information.
So how would you even get to the UK at this point, David? How would you get home after this quarantine period?
I have no idea. We had a flight booked for last Tuesday, this Tuesday just gone, to fly back to the UK 11:30 a.m. from Yokohama. We had to cancel that flight. We have had to pay to have our ticket transferred into an open ticket. to let the airline know when we can next make a flight. But again, we can't make those plans. We haven't got a clue.
There's no information coming from your embassy, the health authorities, or the crew on board?
I've made a plea for that this morning for the British Embassy, for the health officials in the UK to inform us. The information on board is very limited. We've been told 20 people have been taken off. We've been told to wear face masks when we are allowed out on deck, to remain 1 metre apart from each other, not to congregate in groups, to regularly wash our hands and so on, which we've been doing anyway. So, yeah, the information is restricted.
When did you first find out that there were passengers on board who were sick?
Okay. The first 5 days of the cruise, it was fine. And the 80-year-old gentleman that had the infected virus, he was on board when we were on the ship. He got off in Hong Kong, which I think was day 5 from memory. And he was showing no symptoms until he'd left the ship. He went and was checked, told he had the virus, and I assume he's in hospital somewhere now in Hong Kong. It was from that moment, about 2 days later, that we were informed about that incident. And then the health precautions really started to kick in. And we noticed it most when we were in Taiwan. And that was about another 3 or 4 days later when we were having our temperatures taken as we disembarked the ship. And then the announcements were made we would be returning to Yokohama a day early because they wanted to do quarantine checks on us, the medical checks, which is run by the quarantine people. And that is where we are up to. That's when we found out that there is now a serious problem.
Can I just confirm, David, that passenger who was taken off in Hong Kong, how long did he spend on the ship with most of the other passengers? Was there a considerable overlap when he would have come into contact with a lot of the people on board?
Yeah, I know it was a minimum of 5 days that he was on the ship because he was on when we got on in Yokohama. Now, he may have got on at Singapore before getting to Yokohama, but we haven't been told that. So we've certainly been breathing the same air for 5 days.
And on that, has there been any indication of how air conditioning or the ventilation on the ship might be transporting virus around the ship?
No, it hasn't. No, there has been no such news.
So what are your biggest questions that you would like answered by the crew and or health authorities, anyone who can give you information?
When is the quarantine on board the ship going to end? I don't believe anybody can answer that question until we have been health screened. And we have not had any form of health test since getting into Yokohama last Monday. There's been no health check. We haven't been asked how we're feeling. All we are instructed, if we are going down with a cough or a fever, we have to notify the medical facility on board straight away. But we have not been personally checked on. So the rumours, and they are rumours that I'm reading on the internet from other papers and so on, is that there are more infected people on board. But it's rumours. We just don't know. We're not being kept informed. So the question I'd like answered is, are they going to give us more health checks? When are we going to be ending the time of quarantine? What happens when we get back to the UK? Will the quarantine we've been in here be sufficient? Or, because we've got a lengthy flight, 12-hour flight back to the UK, we will be with passengers who've been in, presumably Japan, Hong Kong, China maybe, on that flight, breathing the same circulated air. Will we automatically be put into quarantine when we reach the UK? I hope not.
And are they taking good care of you otherwise, David? How's the food? How's the water situation?
It's improving on a daily basis. It really is. Day one, the ship, they have found themselves in a situation that could never have been planned for. It certainly wasn't on the ship's radar that this was going to happen. I'm sure of that. But so day one, it was very difficult. I didn't have any food for 17 hours. I'm a diabetic, insulin dependent, so that was starting to be a major concern for me. Food did come, albeit a sandwich for breakfast and a sandwich for lunch. Day two, very much improved. We could choose our food from a very short menu. And this morning, breakfast a couple of hours ago, very good breakfast. Apple juice, orange juice, yogurts, an omelette, bacon, hash brown, sausages, pastries, very different, with a pot of coffee. So, I am not complaining. I wish to God we weren't here, but I can't complain about the situation.
Are you coming across people who aren't coping, who are maybe doing a little bit tougher than you?
Yeah. It's very, very early days, but yes, I've got one gentleman in the group who is also a diabetic with a heart condition, and he is really concerned. He's running out of medication. Now, the captain announced that all people who are running short of medication, the ship would fill their prescriptions and supply them free of charge during this quarantine period. I don't know the reason why, but they can't fill his prescription. So I can't imagine it's a lack of insulin. So I don't know what other meds he's on at this stage, but he's been in touch with me this morning. I'm trying to get it sorted. I'm telling him to get in touch with the medical team. The medical team are telling him, apparently, and I'm getting this firsthand from the passenger, and he's only a few cabins from me, and I can't go and knock on his door. That is the really frustrating part. He's literally 3 cabins away from me, and I can't knock on his door. But I have passed the information on to him to keep on at the medical team. They are telling him they can't help him and to contact front desk. That's not good enough. It really is not good enough. So I am hounding Princess, and I'm asking everybody that reads my video blogs, let's get on top of this and let's get every passenger sorted ASAP.
That's Diamond Princess passenger Dave Abel. It is 14 minutes to 6. You're on RNZ National. I'm Nita Blake-Person. We're keen for your feedback tonight. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. US President Donald Trump has launched a broadside at what he calls leakers and liars, dirty cops and bad people. The president hosted a celebration event at the White House following his acquittal in his Senate impeachment trial. He called the impeachment process a disgrace and said he's been through hell. CNN's Caitlin Collins reports.
One day after he was acquitted, President Trump touted the headlines and expressed no remorse as he claimed vindication.
I never thought a word would sound so good. It's called total acquittal.
From the East Room of the White House, the president lashed out at the Democrats he says tried to bring him down.
Adam Schiff is a vicious, horrible person. Nancy Pelosi is a horrible person.
Trump repeated a jab he made at the House Speaker Pelosi during the National Prayer Breakfast, accusing her of being dishonest when she says she prays for him.
I pray for the president. I pray for the president. She doesn't pray.
Pelosi, who was 4 seats away from Trump at the breakfast, later hit back.
I don't know if the president understands about prayer or people who do pray, but we do pray for the United States of America. I pray for him.
Basking in his victory while surrounded by Republican allies, Trump also denounced the one member of his party who voted to convict him on the abuse of power charge.
And then you have some that used religion as a crutch. They never used it before. Say hello to the people of Utah and tell them, I'm sorry about Mitt Romney.
Some Republican senators have claimed Trump learned his lesson after being impeached. But today, he insisted he did nothing wrong.
I had some that said, oh, I wish he didn't make the call, and that's okay. If they need that, it's incorrect. It's totally incorrect.
During the at times rambling remarks, Trump appeared to undermine aides who claimed earlier in the day he would express honesty and humility.
We first went through Russia. It was all Bullshit.
Instead, he lashed out at the investigations against him, which he dismissed as efforts to take him down.
It was corrupt. It was dirty cops. It was leakers and liars. And this should never, ever happen to another president, ever.
That report from Caitlin Collins. A mongrel mob member found guilty of murder yelled, "I didn't do that and I've been framed," at his sentencing in court today. Warren Pay was found guilty of murdering 29-year-old Whaepaia Fonoleiapa in Taita, north of Wellington, in 2008. Pay armed himself with weapons and stabbed Mr Fonoleiapa during an altercation before leaving the scene in a vehicle. Jonathan Mitchell was in court for sentencing.
In the High Court in Wellington this morning, Pay was being sentenced by Justice Cull when he started to shout.
You said words to them, and that was taken as a challenge, and you pulled out the homemade gun, pointed it at Mr Fonoleiapa, and pulled the trigger.
They attacked me from behind. I did not do that. I don't care. I did not do that. I had no intentions. They attacked me from behind.
He continued with his rant, saying he was framed.
I'm an old man. I had no intentions on none of that. They were not telling the truth. I don't care. I'm losing out on my own children and my own mokos, and my mother is dying.
Justice Cull put a halt on proceedings. About 20 minutes later, court was back in session, and she then sentenced Pay to life behind bars with a minimum non-parole period of 10 years. He was taken from the court, and as he was escorted out, he turned around and spoke to his elderly mother.
I want to talk to my mum later. I love you, Mum. God will receive you, Mum. Won't bless that fire, though. Yeah.
Pay's family were visibly upset, and his mother had to leave the court early as she wept. Justice Cull then summarised a letter that Pay had written. She says he appears to be remorseful for his actions and is trying to change from gang life to family life.
He's devastated about the whole incident and never intended to cause serious harm to this person. He wishes he could take the place of his victim, and he is sorry for his actions, for the pain and suffering that he has caused the victim's family.
Justice Cull ordered for the firearm, ammunition and chain-link vest Pay was wearing to be destroyed. He'll be 62 years old before he's eligible for parole. In Wellington, for Checkpoint, called Jonathan Mitchell, Tēnei.
The government set its sights on cutting carbon emissions in the state sector, but admits it has no real information on what impact its own agencies are having on the environment. Figures released to Checkpoint show several of the biggest government departments don't know how much carbon they're creating, and most don't have a plan on how to curb it. Environmentalists and academics say that's not good enough, and if combating climate change is as important as this government claims, it needs to lead from the top.
Climate change is the challenge that defines my generation.
Jacinda Ardern had a bold take on climate change before becoming Prime Minister, but how is that challenge being met in the government's own home, the public sector? Last week it announced $200 million of funding to cut coal burners from schools and hospitals to curb carbon emissions. But beyond those buildings, Climate Change Minister James Shaw admits little is known about the state sector's environmental impact.
Everything starts with having good information. And the problem that, most agencies have got is that they haven't even got good information yet. And that's really got to be the first step.
Government agencies have not been mandated to report their carbon emissions, and very few have. Documents released to Checkpoint show the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Trade, Police, Corrections, the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and the Ministry for Business, Employment and Innovation confirm they don't have any records for the past 5 years. The Ministry of Health had limited reporting of rental car emissions and flights. The Ministry for Primary Industries had a more comprehensive overview, including energy and travel usage. Perhaps, as expected, Ministry for the Environment had a full breakdown, including the average carbon emissions of each employee. James Shaw says it will take time to get everyone to that level.
The state sector is enormous, right? It occupies almost a third of the economy. It just takes time to get rolling. But, it is clear, particularly now that you've got bipartisan support from across the House on the zero carbon bill, that agencies now know exactly what every other sector of the economy knows, which is that our emissions, the political leadership of this country is united, our emissions profile has to come down. Our CO2 emissions in particular have to come down very steeply and very quickly. And the first and easiest place to do that is in the domain of transport. So I guess they've got their marching orders.
James Shaw says the Zero Carbon Act, which commits New Zealand to zero carbon by 2050, sets a clear directive for limiting emissions. He expects the government to start leading by example.
I mean, it's important to me that at a time when we're asking everyone in every sector of the economy to make the switch, that government agencies walk the talk and lead by example.
The public sector is estimated to employ around 400,000 people, making up about 18% of New Zealand's total workforce. Dave Frame, the director of the New Zealand Climate Change Research Institute, says they're lagging behind.
It's a little frustrating but and fairly predictable, I think, that the government has probably spent a bit much time burnishing its halo about its ambitious target rather than actually thinking about how the core functions it oversees are going to have to change as part of reaching that target.
Iwi Leaders Climate Change Group Chair Mike Smith is suing the government over what he says is a failure to act fast enough on climate change. He says the lack of data on the state sector's emissions proves his point.
It is what it is, and that seems to be very little. It's surprising to me to see that in the last 5 years the state sector has done next to nothing. But this means that we can look forward to them now making some real progress, and starting at the top of government, there's lots of great opportunities to lead by example right across the state sector.
Mike Smith is hopeful those changes can be made as soon as possible, and not just claims that turn out to be a bunch of hot air. NASA astronaut Christina Cook is finding her feet again after landing safely back on Earth following almost a year in space. The 41-year-old has completed the longest single space flight by a woman, spending 328 days in space, orbiting the Earth more than 5,000 times. The BBC's Palab Ghosh reports.
Christina Cook, your record holder, she is out.
So pleased to be back on Earth. After nearly a year on the International Space Station, she's glad to be home.
Cook now is going down the slide.
Sliding off the Soyuz space capsule that brought her back, she's getting used to the Earth's gravity after being in space so long. Earlier, there were hugs with the crew as they said their goodbyes. She returned on the Soyuz with two other crew members.
7:50 p.m. Central Time.
Her stay is just 12 days short of the all-time US record set by Scott Kelly in 2016.
Good separation burn.
Before setting off, during a live link-up with the ISS, she had this to say about her historic achievement.
Well, for me, it's just all about the honor that I feel to follow in the footsteps of my heroes, and hopefully I can make it about paying homage to them. They're the ones that paved the way for us to all be where we are today. And also I look at it as an opportunity to hopefully inspire the next generation of future explorers.
Among those heroes was Valentina Tereshkova, the first female cosmonaut in 1963. Early on in the Soviet Union's space program. But she didn't get a second mission. 5 years ago, at an event to unveil her space capsule at the Science Museum in London, she told me that it was because of sexism by her superiors.
We had been preparing for a female flight, but it was Korolov's decision not to risk women's lives because one of the women in the Space Corps already had a family. We were against that decision. We were talking about it, and indeed we were writing to the Central Party Committee, disagreeing with that decision.
Even now, 90% of all those who've been in space have been men.
Men and women are just as capable of being astronauts. All astronauts should be chosen for their mission based on the skills and qualities that they have, and gender isn't one of them.
Late last year, Christina Cook was involved in another piece of history as she took part in the first all-female spacewalk in more than half a century of space travel. NASA plans to send astronauts back to the moon within the next 4 years. Christina Cook is among the favourites to be the first woman to set foot on the moon.
And that was Pelab Ghosh reporting. Time now for some of your feedback, and lots coming in on the RNZ TVNZ merger. This one from Michael. The Minister is trying to unscramble an egg. The decision to move what was the public broadcasting fee to all comers under the control of NZ On Air was the end of public broadcasting. Taxpayer money is being used to support production across a wide range of players. Close NZ On Air, return that funding and increase public broadcasting and begin the discussion about the what and how. He says every time government fiddles with broadcasting, it gets worse. Think Charter, who is advising Cabinet and the Minister. And this one about changes to RNZ concert. Now there will be no respite for those who do not like the pop music, noise, etc. and enjoy the serenity of classical. Some will stop listening to the radio altogether. Surely there are enough youth channels. Couldn't there be some way to keep it? We'll be back after the news at 6.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. New Zealand airline pilots have expressed safety concerns over ongoing problems with Auckland Airport's main runway. A number of flights were diverted or delayed yesterday afternoon after the runway was shut down for maintenance. The second time this has happened this year. Andrew Ridling from the Airline Pilots Association questioned whether adequate investment has been made in the runway. He says he was shocked to hear of 30-centimetre chunks of concrete coming loose when planes land. Mr Ridling says this only has to occur once to be a considerable safety issue. A flood-hit Mataura resident says she's been overwhelmed by people offering help with the clean-up. About 30 properties in the Southland town have been affected by flooding. Alison Bishop says about 2 feet of water went right through her house. She says neighbours and local firefighters have all been around to give them a hand.
Look at everybody. The help we're getting. It's amazing. I've got a friend that's cooking food to bring down to us. I've got people that have offered to do laundry. It's just unbelievable.
Mataura resident Alison Bishop. Health authorities are urging New Zealanders who've recently returned from China to register with a new helpline if they're in self-imposed quarantine. The Ministry of Health says anyone who returned after Monday should isolate themselves for 2 weeks if they were in mainland China. Anyone who travelled from Hubei or Wuhan City should also avoid social gatherings, workplaces, schools and restaurants. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says registration allows health staff to make sure they have enough help. Fire and emergency suspects one of the several wildfires in Hawke's Bay this week may have been deliberately lit. Crews are monitoring 4 fires, including 2 near Waipoua, 1 south of Hastings and another west of the town. The Principal Rural Fire Officer, Trevor Mitchell, says an investigation is underway into a blaze on Wednesday north of Napier.
It was about half a hectare, so we're very lucky it got reported by a truck driver very, very early on in the piece, so we got on it quite quickly, and the conditions were favourable for us.
Trevor Mitchell of Fire and Emergency. Inmates at Northland's Ngawha prison are being told to limit their shower time as the Kaikohe water supply continues to dwindle. The prison has also stopped watering its gardens and is checking for any on-site water maintenance problems. Katie Doyle reports.
The men at Ngawha prison are normally allowed 2 5-minute showers per day, but this has been slashed to 3 minutes. In addition, all non-essential water use has been suspended, including for the horticulture centre and community garden. A spokesperson says the prison is also planning for more water to be delivered by tank if needed. Kaikohe is currently experiencing a level 4 water restriction, meaning it can only be used for essential use. Ko Katie Doyle, tēnei.
The Broadcasting Minister, Chris Farfoy, has signalled it's unlikely the government will step in to save RNZ concert, but he's urging the broadcaster to look at ways to soften the blow for classical music fans. More than 11,000 people have signed a petition against RNZ's plans to shift concert to the AM frequency to make space for a youth music channel. Mr Farfoy says he has spoken to RNZ.
We're looking into some ways that we might be able to mitigate some of the concerns that have been expressed by loyal listeners of Concert FM. And I don't want to get into too much of that detail, but we heard, we expressed some concern, and we're working on some issues that we hope will mitigate some of that.
Chris Farfoy downplayed any suggestion he might throw concert a lifeline, saying RNZ is independent. It's 4 minutes past 6. The Highlanders' new recruit Mitchell Hunt is hoping to make a name for himself when the Super Rugby season kicks off for the Dunedin-based franchise tonight. After 4 years but only limited game time with the Crusaders, the Tasman first five decided to move south. He gets the chance to start outside All Blacks half-back Aaron Smith when the Highlanders host the South African side, the Sharks.
My main focus will be sort of building on that Mitre 10, that leadership role in and around the group. So that's sort of my mindset. I back my skill set so I can just go out and play as long as I've done my preparation through the week. So wherever I'm put, keen to get out there and just get stuck in.
Mitchell Hunt. The match starts just after 7. Quick bowler Kyle Jamieson will make his Black Caps debut against India for the second one-day international in Auckland tomorrow. He's in for Scott Kuckelden, who has the flu. New Zealand women's tennis number 1 Paige Hurrigan has maintained her unbeaten run at the Fed Cup Asia Oceania Group number 2 tournament in Wellington. New Zealand will meet the Philippines in tomorrow's final after sweeping past Singapore 3-0. Hurrigan beat Singapore's Isabella Tan 6-1, 6-1 after teammate Valentina Ivanov won her singles by the same margin. Emily Fanning and Erin Rutliff then teamed up to win the doubles rubber. The Breakers have another must-win game against the Brisbane Bullets tonight if they want to make the National Basketball League playoffs. They're chasing the elusive 4th spot in the league. The game starts at 9. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Soaked Oats is the Friday Night Live act. The Country Life team travels the surf highway to visit the small Taranaki town of Rahotu. They also check out a new outdoor pursuit known as forest bathing. Music writer Graham Reid selects the mixtape, and because it just happens to be the date, our Sonic Tonic is brought to you by the number 7 on Nights, Lucky for Some, with me, Brian Crump, on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service, it's until midnight tomorrow. Northland, Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Waikato and Waitomo. Mainly fine. Isolated light showers possible during the afternoons and evenings. For Auckland, fine weather. Taranaki to Wellington, including central high country, mostly fine with brief rain tomorrow night. Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloudy with a few showers until tonight, mainly fine tomorrow. Brief period of rain in Wairarapa and Hawke's Bay. For Nelson, fine weather. Bulla to Fiordland, cloud increasing, a few showers in Fiordland later today. Rain for a time tomorrow, then clearing from the south. Marlborough and Canterbury, fine spells increasing. Brief rain tomorrow morning or afternoon, then clearing. Showers persisting about the foothills, possibly thundery with hail. Otago and Southland, mainly fine. Isolated showers in the east tonight. Brief rain tomorrow morning, then isolated showers. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, occasional rain tomorrow evening. RNZ National. It's 7 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, I'm Nita Blake-Person in for Lisa Owen, and this is Checkpoint. New Zealand airline pilots are worried about the safety of Auckland Airport's main runway, with reports of 30-centimetre chunks of concrete coming loose where planes land. A number of flights were diverted or delayed yesterday afternoon after the runway was shut down for maintenance, the second time it's happened just this year. Pilots flying to Auckland from overseas are now being advised to carry extra fuel in case they need to be diverted yet again. Matthew Chernison reports.
Captain Andrew Ridling from the New Zealand Airline Pilots Association says he's been aware that the runway's been deteriorating for years, and he thought repairs were well underway. But he says it's clear that things are getting worse, and he's wondering whether there's been adequate investment.
There's around 280 slabs of concrete on the northern end of which we call Runway 23 at Auckland. These were reconstructed in 1992, and they're reaching basically the end of their design life, from what I can understand. So they need some urgent maintenance. From what I'm hearing from people is that they're breaking down piece by piece.
Mr. Ridling says it's the most heavily used part of the runway, with some 80% of inbound flights landing there.
For me, the shock came to hear that there was 30 centimetre by 30 centimetre, which is a foot by a foot, blocks of concrete breaking off and being picked up off the runway. You know, it only has to occur once to be a fairly major safety concern.
A statement from the airport says there is a maintenance program for the runway, which includes annual replacement of the runway slabs. It announced after yesterday's closure that it will conduct an urgent review to assess whether or not this program should be adjusted. Mr. Ridling says the cost of the disruptions to airlines will be starting to mount.
I would suggest that every aircraft carrying an extra 20 to 30 minutes of fuel would get into the millions. We're not talking small beers here.
The International Federation of Airline Pilots Associations, which represents over 100,000 pilots, released a statement to its members today saying pilots should provide for future closures at the airport and carry a minimum of 20 minutes extra fuel.
There have been over 15 short-notice, unplanned runway closures. One on the 24th of January resulted in the runway being closed for 40 minutes and caused a diversion of 9 aircraft, including a wide-body international arrival.
The association says it's concerning that Auckland Airport only has one runway, with no contingency when it's closed for any reason. In Auckland for Checkpoint, call Matthew Tunison 10A.
Food delivered outside your door, fresh towels if you're lucky, but no clean sheets and only short bursts of fresh air. For nearly 4,000 people aboard the Diamond Princess, this is no cruise. Conditions aboard the vessel, dubbed the prison ship, aren't exactly fit for a king. The cruise ship has been quarantined in Yokohama and more than 60 passengers on board have tested positive for the novel coronavirus. But so far, only a few hundred of the 3,700 passengers have been tested, all of them restricted to their tiny cabins. But not all cabins are created equal. Matthew Smith, a passenger aboard the Diamond Princess, says some people are doing it tougher than others.
Our situation is actually a little more fortunate than many of our shipmates because we splurged for a suite on the vessel, which has given us access continually to the outside on our balcony. And so a lot of people are on the inside cabins. In fact, we got an announcement just about a half hour ago. They did the second round of letting the people in the inside cabins out so deck 14 inside cabins get an hour and a half out on the deck, although it's quite cold here. It's in the high 30s, but it's better than nothing, obviously, for them. But so we have a little extra space and have managed not to start killing ourselves yet. So it's been fine.
This is good news. So you're the lucky ones. What's it like for those other people?
Oh, the last cruise we took with Princess about just under 2 years ago, we took an inside cabin. So we can really sympathize with them, what it's like not to be able to leave a very small space. In the inside cabins, there's a desk and one chair and either 2 beds or 1 bed. There's just not hardly any room to move about. And so we're very sympathetic for them.
So have you been able to communicate with any of those people, Matthew? Is there any way of talking to other people on board at the moment?
Well, there's some, not with the interior people so much. There's actually one, there's a Japanese lady who I've just said hello to a couple times when I've opened the door, and she's opened the door across the hall. So but we haven't been able to speak with them. Out on the balconies, there are people who lean out and talk to each other. But yeah, that's another point, is that the people in the interiors and the staff, they come by to drop off and the food. They've got 1,500 cabins to serve. It takes they've told us about 3 hours to do it, so they've got to keep moving. So there's the people on the inside, not much opportunity for any kind of personal interaction. The cabin stewards will come by to pick up trash or towels or deliver new towels, but there's a lot of stuff they won't do.
So are your rooms still being cleaned, Matthew, when they're taking the towels and things? Is hygiene paramount right now?
They will take the towels. Initially, they weren't doing anything with towels because they had to go back out sea to make more fresh water. So for the first day, they were not taking any towels, but that's fixed now. Yeah, so there's no problem with fresh towels. We haven't asked yet about being able to change the bed linens, although we're going to ask about that today. The restriction is the staff can't come into the cabins at all, so all they can do is either take something or bring something at the door. But yeah, they're supplying fresh towels and toiletries. They had yesterday, I think it was, or the night before last, they had made available a phone line for people to call and ask for sundry items to the extent they needed them. But yeah, at some point, we're going to ask later today about it, whether we can get clean sheets so we can change the bed, because they can't have the steward come in and do it.
Is it just the staff and the crew that are moving around the ship, or are there health authorities as well?
There are health authorities, I know, on the ship. There are, we were informed with the people that were allowed to go out on the deck, they let them out, sound like cages, but they tell them that a certain number, so this morning it was at 8:30, they said that the interior cabins on deck 14 are allowed out onto this one area on deck 15 for an hour and a half, and they've been instructed, they had delivered masks to us, face masks to us yesterday, so they're instructed, wear your face masks at all time and stay at least 1 meter away from any other passengers. So they're trying to give them fresh air, but, minimize. And we were told that there were representatives of the health ministry up there on the out exterior monitoring, making sure people were following the rules. But since we have the access to the outside to minimize any contact, we're not going to actually go out and...
Right. And are you also being tested at any point, Matthew? Have you been tested for the coronavirus?
What they did when they first, before the quarantine started, what they did is the health officials came on board and they went cabin to cabin and did a temperature check with a probe in the ear, and if your temperature was fine, as ours was, they just went on. And my understanding from the information they received is if people showed either signs of a fever or we're experiencing cough, because in addition to taking your temperature, they ask you, do you have a cough? Are you taking any medicine for a headache? And so if you were doing that, they then went and did my understanding is they took the blood testing.
That was Matthew Smith, a passenger aboard the Princess Diamond. Meanwhile, health authorities here are urging several thousand New Zealanders who've recently returned from China to register with a new helpline if they're in self-imposed quarantine. The Ministry of Health's latest advice is anyone who travels to New Zealand after Monday, that's February the 3rd, should isolate themselves for 2 weeks if they were in mainland China or were exposed to someone with the new coronavirus. Anyone who travelled from Hubei or Wuhan City before February 3rd should also isolate themselves, meaning they should avoid contact with others, close contact with others, workplaces, schools and restaurants. The Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, told our reporter Chen Liu registration means people can seek advice and authorities can check on their welfare.
The Healthline has already been there for people to call if they have any queries about coronavirus, and as part of our sort of ongoing approach to the evolving issue overseas and the fact we haven't had cases here, but we know there are people who have come back from China. We would like them to register with Healthline, and there are two reasons for this. The first is it allows Healthline to just check in with them every day or two, because 2 weeks in isolation does create some logistical issues for people, and we want to just check in on their well-being and welfare. And it also allows us just to know where people are who have travelled in from China as part of the planning for our management of this issue. So it's serving a dual purpose, and I think it will be of benefit to all involved.
How does it work? So what would happen if people registered?
Yes, so the key opportunity to register is either through ringing the new dedicated novel coronavirus number, or registering through the Healthline website. And then, people can indicate if they don't want to be called, but it allows us to know where they are. And the intention is that Healthline staff would call them every day or two just to check in that they're fine in terms of their health and well-being, but also if they have any other needs, like making sure they've got enough food supplies and so on, and or have got someone who can help them out with that. We know there are probably a few thousand Kiwis who have returned over the last few days or over the last week or two from China, and we're just putting this additional measure in place as part of our ongoing planning and preparation. So we're also looking to see if we can collect people's details as they come through the border in the future.
And so how did it go? Have you received any figures, numbers? Have anyone registered already?
I haven't yet, but we will have figures first thing tomorrow morning of how it goes today, and we'd be happy to share that. And certainly I'm strongly encouraging people to register. It's, I think, a benefit both to them and just helps us with our ongoing oversight and management of the issue.
That was the Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, talking to our reporter Chen Leo. And that number to register or ask for advice is 0800 358 5453. That's 0800 358 5453. And it's not just Wuhan in lockdown because of the coronavirus. As airlines put flights to China on hold, cities across the whole country are desolate as people fear for their health and safety. Reuters Greater China chief producer Mark Chisholm has spent the past 10 days commuting through Beijing, which he now describes as a ghost city. His colleague Francesca Leiner reports.
It's just after 9 o'clock.
Beijing, like you've never seen it before. It would usually be bustling with commuters at this time of morning. But an extension of the Lunar New Year holidays due to the coronavirus outbreak has cleared the streets of most of its 25 million people.
Empty walkways, empty streets with very little cars, bicycles or motorbikes.
That's Reuters' Mark Chisholm talking. He spent 10 days documenting his eerie path to the office.
This on my left is the Silk Market, where a lot of foreigners come and do their shopping. It's also been closed. Nobody can enter. I'm now going to the Yong'an station, which is on line 1, one of the busiest subway stations. I will now do a thermal scan. Not one single person getting off the train, nobody getting on. Normally, this platform is packed with people and hundreds and hundreds of people on the train. As you can see, completely empty.
Coronavirus is believed to have originated in the central Chinese city of Wuhan, but its spread to several cities has caused many to stay home, fearing for their safety.
As you can see, when we get up here, most, if not every single shop is closed, with only 1 or 2 places open. This is our commute into the office. For the past 10 days, it's been like this. It's almost like we're in a ghost city. I can see a guy spraying disinfectant down the other end of the corridor. When I enter our office building, they will check my temperature, and only because I have a registered card and our office is there am I allowed into the building. People that don't have an office card are not allowed in.
It's 21 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Nita Blakeperson in for Lisa Owen. Cabinet has approved a business case to see whether the government's idea of creating a new supersized public broadcaster is viable. After months of speculation, Broadcasting Minister Chris Farvoy made the announcement at the New Zealand Broadcasting School in Christchurch. He says public media is vital to democracy and national identity, and in the face of unprecedented challenges, the proposed new entity would help future-proof this for generations to come. But Mr Farvoy says the future of RNZ and TVNZ won't be decided until the business case is completed. Political reporter Yvette McCullough has more.
Chris Farvoy coming full circle.
20 years ago, I started my broadcasting journey here.
Back now to try set the course for public media's future.
Public service media is about public good, informing us, educating us, holding people like me to account, and making sure we've got entities that continue to do that in the future is extremely important.
Mr Farvoy says the media industry is facing unprecedented pressure, trying to compete with the likes of Facebook and Google. He says a new entity would have the scale and nimbleness to adapt to the changing landscape.
The different platforms that are popping up all the time that have the ability to deliver to different audiences. I think we've seen the likes of Radio New Zealand try and do things like that, but funding constraints or because they've traditionally been a radio company may have hamstrung them.
The proposed multimedia, multi-platform entity would be based on a mixed funding model, but would be not-for-profit and would operate under a charter to ensure that the public service ethos is king. Mr Fafoy was also clear that New Zealand On Air funding will still play a vital role and that current commercial-free platforms would remain commercial-free. But Mr Fafoy says he isn't going to preempt the business case, what it will mean for jobs or future public media funding. New Zealand Broadcasting School head Tony Simons says he's disappointed with the lack of detail today.
New Zealanders need to wake up to the fact that if we're going to have a robust democracy and we as citizens can identify strongly with who we are, we need to invest a bit more money. And I didn't really get that today, that there's a commitment to spend more money. I'd like to hope that is the case.
National's broadcasting spokesperson Melissa Lee says she's concerned a mega broadcaster would remove diversity.
We want plurality of voice in the media space, and anything that reduces that voice is something that we'll be very concerned about.
She's labelling today's announcement a non-announcement.
There's no plan still. This is almost 3 years down the line, and we're no clearer as to what they are going to do.
Mr Fafoy says this will become a political football, whether he likes it or not. But his message to National is simple.
Well, where's their alternative? We sat and watched for 9 years when TVNZ 6 and 7 were shut down and funding was frozen. And if they don't like what we've got, then what have they got?
The response from members of the public is mixed.
I suppose I'm concerned about the two different media models combining. I don't know how that works in terms of funding.
I don't watch TV.
Here we go again. In fact, TV and radio have been changed so many times that we'll wait till the next government and see if they change it again.
I'm less worried about that than I am about the changes to the classical station.
Mr Fafoy also fielded questions about RNZ's decision to cut back investment for its concert station, instead investing on more youth programming.
Let's just say that there's been a fair bit of feedback over the last 48 hours. Some of it has been directed to me and some of it has been directed to Radio New Zealand. We've outlined some concerns to them last week and we're working on it.
But when asked if he ever listens to concert, his response?
Not regularly. I don't think I'd show up on their ratings.
PwC is expected to report back with its business case by the middle of the year, and then the fate of RNZ and TVNZ and the future shape of public media in New Zealand will be decided. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
Finally tonight, as flood-swamped Southland slowly drains and reopens, some people's first thoughts have been with their furry, four-legged friends. While pets were lodged in special animal evacuation centres, other dogs and cats have become displaced. Our reporter Katie Dodd is in Southland and filed this report.
On the back streets of the town of Edendale, the unassuming Vetco clinic has become a modern Noah's Ark. 22 beloved moggies and pooches and one budgie have been billeted here for 2 days while the town of Matoda was a no-go zone. The clinic's executive officer Nicole Rabbage made the public offer for free pet accommodation, and Southland Emergency Management let evacuees know about it. And after Matoda reopened last night, Ms Rabbage arrived to queues at the clinic door at 8 o'clock this morning, people desperate to reunite with their furry friends. She says Vetco staff have been working around the clock to make sure the animals are well looked after.
They all have their own individual characters. I suppose we had 3 big Rottweiler cross dogs. They were very vocal, but they just wanted some attention. They were fine. The bird didn't make much noise. Probably we've got a pussycat that's 21 years old. He was the most talkative out of all the animals.
That chatty cat belongs to Susan English and goes by the name Shamanita Ms Inquisitive, or the nickname Oprah. While Ms English bunked down at an evacuation centre a few streets away, her other Oriental cat stayed at home in Matoda, where she's found it safe and well. Floodwater swamped Ms English's garage, but her house narrowly escaped, meaning the Oriental hasn't had to get her paws wet, and Oprah will be able to return to her favourite sunny spot on the carpet.
She's in pretty good nick, really. And you're beautiful, aren't you? Yes.
Everybody loves Oprah. Everybody. She's like a big brown teddy bear.
But not everyone has been so lucky to find their pets still at home or have a place to keep them safe. On the Facebook page Southland Flood Find My Pet 2020, set up less than a day ago, the missing list already includes Willow the elderly whippet from Balclutha and Lincoln, a tiny terrier from Gore. And an animal shelter in Invercargill, Forever Homes, is working to distribute food and kitty litter to people whose pet care supplies have been soaked in floodwater. Ms English's daughter, Zoe Miles, says if it weren't for the vet clinic in Edendale, she's not sure what would have happened to her 2 one-year-old cats.
They're young and very excitable, and I thought they need to be somewhere where they're on their own. They're not really used to a lot of people. So as soon as the Civil Defence gave out that Vetco Edendale were happy to take on pets for boarding, we thought, oh, God bless them. So yeah, it was a big load off our minds.
Vetco were expecting all the remaining cats and dogs in their care to be picked up by owners by tonight. Forever Homes is asking people to get in touch if they think they can donate food for displaced dogs, cats or rabbits, or those whose food stocks have been submerged. In Southland, for Checkpoint, call Katie Todd, TNA.
And that's Checkpoint for this evening. Thanks for joining us today on your radio, your television, online, or however you manage to connect with us. From me, Nita Blakeperson, and the team here at Checkpoint, have a lovely weekend.
NZ News headlines, I'm Catriona McLeod. Pilots have expressed safety concerns over problems at Auckland Airport's main runway, including loose concrete. New Zealanders who've recently visited China are encouraged to register with a new helpline. The Broadcasting Minister says it's unlikely the government will step in to save RNZ concert. A Motueka company has been fined over $100,000 for the unsafe removal of asbestos, and a person has drowned at Ohope Beach in the Bay of Plenty this afternoon. Those are the headlines. Our next news is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
There were a number of people who were blocked from reaching the departure lounge and therefore were unable to make it onto this flight.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
Where there used to be streams,